Baseball fans, it is time once again for another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. With over 50 years in professional baseball and making a multitude of fantastic relationships along the way, Frank Coppenbarger shares great stories with weekly guests from various areas inside of the game. It's all here on the Fans First Sports Network. Let's get ready to play ball. Here's Frank Coppenbarger.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. And today's going to be an outstanding show. Got my good buddy, my longtime co-worker, Mr. Greg Casterioto as our guest. Greg, welcome.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate you having me on. It was funny during your intro. I was looking at all those pictures, and it's like going down memory lane, you know, with our career and everything. Just really, really cool. I'm really happy for you and your success with this.
Thank you so much, and we're happy with you. And we're going to talk about your career, though, instead of mine. And I'll just say we spent a lot of years together with the Philadelphia Phillies. Greg was a former longtime director of baseball communications for the Phillies. I wanted him to talk about that a little bit at first, and then we'll go on to what you're doing now. And I got a lot of things I want to bring up. So, Greg, let's get started, all right?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, you know, I joked with Greg when he was early on in his baseball career that I wasn't going to hold his hand throughout what was then the National League. It's still the National League on the field. Then I think it was the National League all the way around. But we joked about it. But let me tell you, this guy didn't need any hand holding. He knew what the heck he was doing right from the start. An excellent PR guy with the Phillies a long time. Through the great years of 07 through 11, especially with a lot of all-star players, a lot of postseason appearances, and World Series time, a couple times in a row. So, Greg, tell us a little bit about what a Major League PR person's duties are. Kind of give everyone a rundown, if you would.
Yeah. So, you know, first, Frank, it's funny you mentioned that. I literally told my wife that story this morning when we were talking about me doing the show, was when you called me and said, I'm not going to hold your hand through the whole National League. Still one of my favorite stories of all time, but definitely something I needed to hear that day. So basically the job of a Major League PR person is we serve as kind of a gatekeeper to the players. From the media. We are the go-between from the players to a lot of different facets of a baseball organization, whether it's the community relations department, the marketing department, you know, if accounting needs to talk to them about something about their paycheck, we're usually the guys that everybody comes to get access to the players. Obviously not the traveling secretary like you were and the clubhouse attendants because we're all part of the support staff together. But with our offices being upstairs and kind of also downstairs, we were the go-between between the front office and the media and the players. And, you know, sometimes that was a lot of fun, and sometimes it was a little interesting with some of the situations we would run into on a day-to-day basis. It's basically managing personalities, right? We're just, you know, there's a natural, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a natural, you know, almost like an enemy of the, you know, each side thinks the other one's the enemy when it comes to the meeting the players. And it's our job to bring those two groups together and do what's best for the organization.
Well, if the media portrays the player in a good light, the player's all for it. But if they're critical about him, and sometimes it's justified, you know, then of course the media is, you know, a number one enemy. So I get completely what you're saying.
Right. If a reporter writes that a guy's hitting 186 against left-handed pitching, and the guy pulls you into the back room and starts yelling at you, why did they write this? And you say, well, what are you hitting against left-handed pitching? And he says 186. Well, that's why they wrote it, because it was factual. You know, nobody's looking, you know, for the most part, you know, reporters are not looking to make players look bad. They're just looking to write a good story. They're looking to get some eyeballs, some readership, and tell a good story about the team.
Exactly. So now kind of give a little, if you could, in a quick way, a little rundown of sort of the general duties, like over the course of a year, what you do. And let's say starting with the winter time, getting ready for spring training. Let's kick it off there and take it all the way through the postseason. Since the World Series is going on right now, I think it's an appropriate time. You see a lot of these folks on the field in the background on the TV screen, and you may not even realize who they are and what they're doing. So, Greg, kind of give a little rundown of the job in a nutshell.
Well, it's interesting, Frank, because you know this, but I don't think a lot of fans know it. We don't turn the lights off after the last game is played, right? We're still working all through the offseason, right? So, the off seasons have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter as time goes on. There's just more to do than there used to be maybe 20, 30 years ago. So, we do. We have a little bit of downtime after your last game is played, but then you got to ramp it right back up after that. So we start in the wintertime with, promoting the team in January. We used to do what was called the winter tour in Philadelphia. I don't know if they still do anything similar to that anymore, but for many years, that's what we did. You bring the players around to different community events, and you try to build anticipation for the coming season. I'm not sure how necessary something like that is anymore, but, especially for a team that wins a lot, but we didn't always have teams that won. So we had a lot of promotional work. And then once February hits, as you well know, we're all down in spring training for 6-7 weeks, and we're getting everybody ready for the regular season. For us in the PR department, it's kind of very similar to the regular season. We're making players available. We're making the manager available every day, the general manager available, the president of baseball operations, whoever it may be at that time. And it's a long time, as you know. Spring training gets long, and then we hit the regular season. And for the, like I said earlier, the PR person is a member of the traveling party and the support staff. So, our job day to day is making sure the clubhouse is open, making sure the manager is prepared. I always joke about it, right? A baseball manager talks to the media more than any other job on the planet, I think. Even more, maybe even more than the president of the United States. They're talking twice a day, every day, for like 7.5 months. And you got to make sure that, look, the pitfalls are going to happen, but you got to keep them to a minimum. And you got to prepare the manager and to a lesser extent, prepare the players every day for what questions the media may have. So it's almost like Groundhog Day all year long. You're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, but, you love it, right? I mean, everybody loves once 7 o'clock hits and that game starts, there's no better place to be than in a ballpark. And we all know that.
Right. So let me stop you a little bit here before you continue on with the job of a big league PR guy. You learned from the great Larry Shank, over 50 years with the Phillies. He was in the PR department. He invented the first media guide and put it together on his kitchen table with his wife. Clearly, the game's a lot different now than it was back then, but Larry kind of got you started in all this, didn't he?
He did. I owe a lot to Larry. He was a great mentor to have. At the time, I probably, my early 20s, I probably didn't realize how lucky I was to be learning stuff from him. But I think once I got along in my career and, Larry kind of shut it down for himself. Once we started getting really good 07, 08, he kind of moved on to a more of an alumni role, but he was always there, for me to lean on, for me to go to with any questions I had. I felt very lucky at the Phillies organization because I feel like we had so many old school baseball guys to lean on, whether it was Dallas Green, John Vukovich, Larry Bowa, yourself, Frank, or somebody like Larry Shank. I was really lucky as a young PR guy to have so much baseball wisdom. Chris Wheeler, Harry Callis, at my fingertips, guys that I could go to and kind of pick their brains and lean on for any advice. So yeah, Larry was definitely probably the main one, but it was great to have just so many Phillies legends around.
So continue on. So let's you kind of got us started with the season and talk about that. So I don't think the casual baseball fan has any idea what your day is like. Let's talk about a day either at home or on the road. We have a night game, and you talk about what time you actually go to bed at night.
Yeah, so they're as social media grew, the bedtime got later and later because there was more to do after games. So we kind of came in a little bit later in the morning than we used to in the early days. We would probably get there around 10 or 11 o'clock as opposed to 8 or 9 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game,
Right.
But we would have to read all the papers. We'd have to go through all the websites. We'd have to know what was being talked about. Listen to talk radio on your drive in to the ballpark. Listen to what was being said on WIP or 97.5, the sports stations, so that you had a handle on how your team was being talked about, in the public. And once we get there, it's start the game notes and then what the game notes are is it's our daily pack of information for all the broadcasters and the beat writers and any media that walks into the press box to it's our way of promoting the club. So what are we saying about the club that's really awesome? Is it, does somebody have a hitting streak, or does somebody have a scoreless streak, or what promotions are going on? The game notes every day was our way of getting information out there to the media, who then would pass it on to the public. So that was a big part of our early day. And then probably about 3 o'clock or so, we would head down to the clubhouse to prep the manager, poke my head in your office, say hi to you, see what players were milling around, because 3:30 is when the clubhouse would open to the media. And you really wanted your guys to be ready. And you didn't want them to get caught off guard by too much that. Now, you couldn't be perfect, right? You didn't know everything that was said. And sometimes you'd ask a player, do you want to go over this of what to say, if they were asked this question, and sometimes they would want to, and sometimes they'd say, I got this, no problem. The manager, though, was always receptive to our advice.
Right. So now I want to ask a question. So
yeah.
When you talk about the notes, some people might think this is 6 or 7 bullet points on a simple piece of paper. The notes is a packet of information.
Yeah.
Notes on each guy, what's going on with each player on the field over the last few days, for example, and the current all throughout the year. Also, all the stats are in there too. When does all that get done? After a game?
Well, if you're by yourself on the road, yes. If you're doing them by yourself, and because our PR department would be, I think we had about 5 people when I left the Phillies, and everybody works home games. But when you're on the road, you're a department of 1. So yes, starting them on the road, getting back to the hotel, ordering a late night dinner because you're going to be up for a few hours.
Yeah.
Calling whoever's working the Elias Sports Bureau desk and getting yelled at because it's so late. But hey, they manned it 24 hours a day, and try to get some updated stats on what the team was doing. Historically speaking, maybe the last time somebody did this or that. But when you're home, you can pretty much get away because you've got like 5 or 6 people doing them at home throughout the day.
So they work on them the next morning then, or
yeah.
When they get to work.
It depends. Yeah, home versus road. Yeah.
All right. So now, if you guys make the All-Star team, and even if the All-Star game is not in Philadelphia, which ironically it will be in 2026, you got to go along with them and handle all those hundreds of media folks and your player, correct?
Yeah, I worked a few All-Star games, and a couple years we had our manager and our whole coaching staff go, obviously, when we were in the World Series in 08 and 09. So much more involved in those years, right? I mean, like you got to make sure, because the manager is your responsibility. If it's not your manager, he's not your responsibility.
I even had to go. I understand.
Exactly, right. I mean, like you got to, we got the chartered planes, which was great and everything, and it was an amazing experience. But yeah, to your point, Frank, yeah, you're not getting an All-Star break if you've got a few players that are going to the All-Star game. You're likely going.
So you made a lot of All-Star appearances, as did our players. In fact, I would call you a perennial All-Star because you were there a lot. Sometimes we might only had 1 or 2 guys, but when things were going good from 07 through, say, 11 or 12, we had numerous All-Stars.
Yeah.
And as you alluded to, after World Series years, when we had, our manager, Charlie Manuel, and the entire coaching staff, and, a good number of players, because let's face it, those players are what got us through the World Series and got us there. And so naturally they're going to be rewarded with All-Star appearances. But also you did postseason stuff too, even years we didn't play in it, correct?
Yeah, I worked a few playoffs when we didn't appear, just to, you always want to you want to do it before your club makes it, right? You don't want to get caught off guard, and you want to know that, like, it blows up. It blows up. I mean, the regular season is nothing like the postseason, especially after you get past the first round. And you've got media coming in of people you've never met. I'll never forget. I got a story for you. So
we like stories.
What's that?
We like stories.
Exactly. I don't know if it was 08 or 09. I want to say 09, and we were at Dodger Stadium. And, part of your job as a PR person is to, I hate to use this word, but it kind of fits, to protect the players to some degree, and especially when it's batting practice. A lot of guys don't like to be bothered, especially our former second baseman, Chase Utley. When he was working, and the fans knew that, and the fans could appreciate that, and that's what made him so good. There were almost different rules for different players, and there was a situation. We were at Dodger Stadium, and of course, you're going to get celebrities to come out, and there's this short guy on the field who I did not recognize, and he was going up to all the players while they were, trying to hit in their round of batting practice, and I went up to an official at Major League Baseball, and I said, who is this guy? He's got to get off the field. We can't have him bothering the players. Well, it turns out I didn't know. It was Guillermo from the Jimmy Kimmel Show, and I didn't know who he was, So he was somebody that was pretty important to be on the field because it would give us some national exposure that night on Jimmy Kimmel's show. So it was moments like that, in the postseason where you didn't have all your regular people down there, and you had to adjust on the fly, because some people could be all around the cage but not everybody could. So you had to judge it based on who was going to give us the most eyeballs.
Well, it's pretty funny that you would say that, because in my role in 09 at Yankee Stadium, the video area where the players could go watch their at-bats, the previous at-bat was just off of the dugout. And Kevin Kemishowi, our longtime videographer, was, stationed there with all his equipment. And Chase Utley was trying to get over there, the same guy you're talking about, to view one of his at-bats. And it was a cold night in New York, and about 5 or 6 Major League Baseball security guys decided to camp out there because it was warm, it was dry, and there were TVs. And Utley had to come and get me to get him out of the way so he could get to the TV screen to watch his at-bats. So that didn't go over very well.
We could probably spend the next 2 hours talking about Chase Utley stories just because, because there was so much we had to do in a good way to, make sure that he got what he needed every day to be the player he was, right? And it's funny. Now he was one of the best I worked with.
Right. So, all right. So now you made all these appearances at the All-Star game and the playoffs, postseason playoffs and World Series. So now the World Series, if it's the Phillies, let's say, you got to put together a pretty comprehensive media guide just for that event, don't you?
Yeah, we had to have a postseason media guide ready to go. We had to have recaps of all the players' seasons. They got to get put together very, very quickly, right after the season's over. And obviously, we're still doing game notes every day, updating everybody on what's going on with the players. But yeah, as I said earlier, as you would progress in the postseason, the contingent of media would get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And look, for someone like me, I thrived off that kind of stuff. I loved it. The more eyeballs, the better when you're a publicist. And I loved action. I loved people being around the team. It was part of what you love about this job. Like you don't want to be sitting around doing nothing all day. Listen, we all know we have bad years, and those years are a little rough to get through. You take the good with the bad. In the bad years, you just kind of relax a little bit more than maybe you would. But I was the kind of PR guy that I loved having a lot of people around the team. I loved when that clubhouse opened. I wanted as much media as possible during their allotted time, and I think we did a pretty good job, our department, of making sure the players were taken care of and also that the media got what they needed.
You were excellent, no doubt about it. And that takes us through what we're experiencing right now, except we're not there anymore, but the Dodgers and the Blue Jays are, as this show is being recorded. So, Greg, we're going to shift into your new life. You landed this great job as the Vice President of Public Relations for Perfect Game, And we're going to come back and talk to you about your role with Perfect Game and what Perfect Game actually is right after these messages. So stand by. All right, we're back with our guest, Greg Casterioto, Vice President of Public Relations for the Perfect Game Company. And Greg, tell us, what is that?
So Perfect Game, Frank, is the world's largest amateur baseball and softball platform. We put on amateur baseball events pretty much all over the world throughout the year. We have about 10,000 events that we put on each year. We're in over 40 states. Last year, we had tours of Australia and Japan that were very successful. So basically what we do is we put young players from ages 8 to 18 in a position to succeed, in a position to be seen. And obviously the 8-year-old is not as important as it is for the 18-year-olds, but we have events that go on around the country throughout the year that attract major league scouts, college recruiters. We have a website, perfectgame.org, where all the player stats are there when they compete in our events. They have player profiles. We have what's called perfectgame.tv, PGTV, where we air a lot of games throughout the year, a lot of amateur games, including our All-American Classic, which is our big all-star game every August. So Perfect Game is it's a very valuable asset for young baseball players to be a part of.
There's no doubt about that. As a high school coach, I'm well versed with Perfect Game. I think every kid on our team has some sort of Perfect Game T-shirt, sweatshirt, hat, or something that they're wearing at practice all the time. So I know they're very involved. And as far as the coaching, so when you have these events in the summertime, do you get a lot of college coaches there?
Yeah, we do. As you start at the high school ranks primarily, but yes, we have college coaches that come out, college recruiters that come out to see these kids play. Like I said, big scouts from big league organizations come out. So it's valuable exposure for these kids. It really is, and obviously, especially as they get older in their baseball career. But even for the younger kids, the experience of playing in Perfect Game events it's unmatched in the world of youth baseball.
So talk about the investors. I know that you were involved in getting some pretty big name guys that you know. My show's all about relationships and experiences, and you yourself made many relationships and had lots of experiences in your years with Major League Baseball. Talk about some of the guys that have joined Perfect Game as an investor, and tell us a little bit about it.
So the owners of Perfect Game are Rick Thurman and Rob Ponger. Rick is a former big league agent. Rick was an agent with Beverly Hills Sports Council for over 40 years. He helped start the company. And Rob was with IMG Academy for a very, very long time in different roles. So with Rick, especially with his background as being an agent, when he invested in Perfect Game and came over here as part owner, he brought some of his players as investors. So we've got guys like Trevor Hoffman, Hunter Pence, Flash Gordon, the former closer. And then he actually reached out to even players that he had never dealt with as an agent. So we've got guys like Mo Vaughn and Jose Contreras that are part of the organization. Yeah. When I came here, they hired me in the summer of 2023. And after about 6 months, when I saw they were putting even more investors involved, I thought, there's a guy that I know who might want to be involved in this. So I brought in Charlie Manuel as an investor here. I asked our ownership group if they would want Charlie to come in, and they were all for it. They loved the idea of Charlie being a part of it, him being a legendary manager in Major League Baseball. So Charlie, Frank, as you know, I was Charlie's right-hand man in Philadelphia for over a decade. Yep, still very close to this day. He's like a grandfather to my kids. Him and his wife Missy, just tremendous people. So it was great being able to have that relationship with him and bringing him over as an investor, and he absolutely loves it. His actual grandkids play in our events sometimes in Florida and Atlanta. And Charlie's always calling me. At his age, he can't make it out to as many events as he'd like to, but he's always calling me, asking me what we're doing new in Perfect Game. And he actually did serve as a coach actually at an event in Fort Myers in August. So, which we do that a lot with a lot of our investors.
That's great. Well, I know your role with the Phillies and your experience there, and there were some other guys you were able to have, and then you see some guys at some of these events that have come with their kids, like Brett Myers has been there. Talk about some of the other guys that you run into once in a while.
Oh boy, man, who do I run into? We just saw Matt Kemp at one of our events. His nephew was playing. It's very funny. Troy Tulowitzki, his son plays in a lot of our stuff. Miguel Cabrera. I mean, basically, if you're a dad whose son is playing baseball, more or less, he's going to be playing in some kind of a perfect game event sometime throughout the year. So it is cool that you can come to our events and you can run into big league guys. Frank Thomas, was at a lot of our events the last few years. Obviously, if their kids age out, you kind of don't see them anymore. But it's a continual process. It's a lot of fun. I have made a tremendous amount of new connections through Perfect Game, because in my role, I only knew you if you played for the Phillies. And I was lucky enough that the Phillies brought in a lot of top name guys over my career there. During my 23 years, we had a lot of big time guys that signed with us or were traded to us. But I don't know a guy like Gary Sheffield. And now I've gotten to know Gary Sheffield so well because both of his sons the last few years are big time athletes that have played in Perfect Game events. So Sheffield and I have become pretty good friends over the last couple of years. So it's interesting. I never thought that at this stage of my career that I'd be involved with guys that I didn't have as players. And here I am. Mo Vaughn has become a trusted friend of mine. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So talk about the TV channel a little bit. I know you've got former Major League broadcaster Darren Sutton does a lot of the play-by-play on there. Talk about that channel a little bit, and then I'm going to talk about it. Some things I've noticed.
Okay. So perfectgame.tv, PGTV, it's a free app. It's totally a free service for people to get on your iPhones or your iPads or whatever you're using. I'm a huge fan of PGTV. I think it's so cool. We're like the center of the universe for amateur baseball. We're airing games almost on a weekly basis. We have tons of shows that dive deep into the game. We have a whole podcast network, where Mo's got his podcast and Darren's got his podcast. But yeah, Darren is amazing at what he does with Perfect Game. He gets to know not just the players, but also their families. And he watches these kids grow from like 8, 9, 10 years old all the way up. He gets in deep with the family. So when he's on there talking about these kids, it's totally genuine. It's legit. He knows them so well. So by the time they're 17, 18 years old and graduating high school, they're almost like, Darren's like a trusted uncle to these families. It's really cool. And Hunter Pence is one of our broadcasters as well. He does a lot with us. Steve Phillips, a former big league GM, he's broadcasted some events. So
stop on Hunter Pence for a second. I want to ask you.
Sure.
There's a guy named Pence that throws about 100 miles an hour, a high school kid. Is he related?
That's Hunter's nephew, Striker Pence. Yes.
Wow.
That's how it's Hunter's brother Howie. It's his son. It's his oldest son, Striker. And Striker's pretty amazing.
He has a perfect first name for a pitcher.
His younger brothers are Ace and Maverick. So so Howie and Allie Pence, who are awesome people, they've done a heck of a job. They kind of own the name department when it comes to naming your sons.
Yeah.
Striker's a great kid. He's got a ton of talent. It's going to be fun. This is a guy that potentially is going to be a 1-1 in a couple years. I mean, he's throwing 100 miles an hour at 15, 16 years old, and he's got the ability to do it. Whether people think he should do it or not is another thing, but he's got the ability to do it, and it's pretty amazing. And yeah, Hunter's a big part of Perfect Game. I'm sorry, Striker's a big part of Perfect Game.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I noticed that name, and I'm like, he's got to be related.
Oh yeah.
So one thing I really like about your TV, in addition to the games that you show, there are thumbnail stuff on virtually any player that you've had, at least the high school age kids. And I'm going to tell you that helps us here, us high school coaches. That's my other retirement job, I guess you could say. we can watch videos on other teams' pitchers and hitters and pick up some stuff once in a while. It's really helpful.
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, that's the goal, right? The goal is for PGTV and for Perfect Game as a whole to be that one-stop shop for college coaches, for high school coaches, for parents, for grandparents to see what these kids are doing and the progression that they're making over the years. So that's the whole goal of this thing.
So tell me now, like, I know you just recently had what's known as the World Wood Bat World Series.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And tell me, what is that like? Kind of describe the event.
So basically, it takes place in Jupiter, Florida every year, and it's known as Jupiter, like one word, right? Like that's the word that everybody knows it as. It is a multi-day event with the best teams, the best travel baseball teams from around the country coming in, and all I can compare it to is like baseball paradise. If you are a baseball fan at the grassroots level, this is an event that everybody should come to. There are games going on. There's I would say probably 7 or 8 games going on at once throughout the complex. We do it in Jupiter at the complex where the Marlins and Cardinals have spring training.
Uh-huh.
And there's sprawling fields all over the place, and there's major league scouts all over the place, and there's college recruiters, and there's parents, and there's aunts and uncles and grandparents, and there's also MLB alumni walking around as well. And that's where we saw Matt Kemp. Cameron Maben was there. Billy Wagner was there.
Yeah.
You're walking around and just, you're bumping into a who's who in the baseball world. So it's a really cool event. And, of course, you have your autograph seekers out there because they know by now that there's going to be big leaguers walking around. Mo was coaching a team. Mo Vaughn. Ryan Klesko was coaching a team down there. Wags was coaching his team down there. So it's just a really cool place to be around in the off season, because it's every October, and I can't emphasize it enough. I had Jim Salisbury down there the last couple of years, big league ball writer, Jim Salisbury, our old buddy. And Jimmy was just blown away. He had no idea what to expect before he got there. And he couldn't believe the level of precision that these games are happening. And listen, you're a slave to the rain, right? And that's one thing we did have this year. We had a couple of days of rain and we had to reschedule games. And it's amazing what Perfect Game is able to do, even with the rescheduling. It's a pretty cool event.
So would you say there are hundreds of players? Thousands?
Oh yeah, there's hundreds of players. We probably get about
teams?
What's that?
How many teams would there be, for example, approximately?
Well, 120 in the main complex, and then there's more across town at the freshman complex. So 120 teams just at our complex, for the older kids, and then the younger kids. I forget how many teams it is down at the other the freshman tournament. But again, you've got about 700 scouts running around. Everybody's in a golf cart. You got to be careful not to get run over by a golf cart, especially by me. It's just a very, very cool event. And again, there's just people everywhere you look. It's as far as the eye can see. It's really cool.
So I want to ask, what's the feeling of some of these former big league players that are investors or coaching now about, the length of a season for a high school kid or even a younger kid and playing in all these events? How do they feel about playing other sports?
I would say almost any of them would say play as many sports as you can. Get involved in as many sports. Play soccer, play basketball, play football, play rugby, whatever it is that you excel at, definitely play as many sports as you can. I've heard these guys say it over and over and over again. They all advocate for it. Obviously as your youth career goes on and you kind of might want to specialize in one sport because that's what you're best at. But I think especially at the younger levels, our guys will advocate playing as many sports as you can all year long.
That's good to hear because, I remember being in the clubhouse once when Tom Gordon was playing for the Phillies and his son, Nick, who ended up being the number 1 draft pick and had played in the major leagues himself. He was about 10 years old. and he was there. And so I was over by his locker one day, and I said, "Oh, you play ball?" "Yeah, I play." I said, "Oh, well, how many games do you play, or what's the name of your team, or whatever, just to make a little conversation." Well, he was out of the Orlando area where Tom comes from. And the kid told me they played over 100 games a year, and my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And that's the first I heard of that much amateur baseball. I mean, back in the farmlands when I grew up, you played about 12 or 15 games, and then you started getting the football out,
Yeah, youth sports has come a long way from the rec leagues. And look, the rec leagues are so important. They not every kid, needs to be involved in travel sports. The rec leagues are so great. I look at my two little kids, they're my two little girls, like they love playing in the rec leagues. And that's all they need is what you just said, Frank, 12 to 15 games. And they're good, but yeah. For the kids that love it, and listen, a lot of the parents love it.
There's no doubt in my mind about that.
They love it. I mean, the camaraderie that comes with traveling around, and I see these kids who play in the All-American Classic, right? The top 60 baseball players according to Perfect Game, top 60 high school baseball players according to PG rankings, and these kids have such a rapport with each other. They come from different parts of the country, but they know each other so well because they play against each other throughout the year, and it's really cool to see them come together. Different ethnicities, different races, different dialects, speech dialects, like everybody coming together, and these kids just have such a great time at Perfect Game events. I love watching it.
Well, I'm sure the parents like it, and I'm guessing when the games are over and they head back to the hotel, it's like an indoor tailgate party, I would think.
It is. It sometimes it can be. That's for sure. The parents do get to know each other. They have a great time, and I had a parent recently say to me, he said, I would never, all the miles and all the money that is taken for my kid to have this career, I would never trade it for anything because of the time that he got to spend with his son that he may not have gotten all over the country. And he said, I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I thought that was so cool to hear him say that.
Well, it's really cool to hear them say that. And clearly they've had a great experience. Hopefully all of them have had a great experience doing it. And they're enjoying it still, and maybe it'll lead them somewhere. You never know. There's diamonds in the rough all the time.
Yeah, and that's and listen, we have a charity arm. We have a charitable arm called the Perfect Game Believe in Baseball Foundation that does exactly that. It does its best to find diamonds in the rough, and maybe help some families that maybe can't afford the costs of travel baseball. So we do try to, we have an arm of the organization that tries to help in that area as well.
I'm glad to hear you mention that. I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Well, Greg, one of the guys I'd like to have on my show sometime is Charlie Manuel. But with the sign-in process, I'm thinking that if I'm going to get him on there, I'm going to have to fly you down to his house to help him with his computer like you used to do.
That's a good point. I probably have to be there to help him fix his computer.
Absolutely. You got to fix that computer. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been great to have you with us. I wish you continued success in your role there at Perfect Game. They got the right guy for the job, no doubt about it. And thanks again. And fans, thanks for joining. Remember, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fans First Sports Network. And we'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks with Frank Coppenbarger. Tune in next week for another great episode on the Fans First Sports Network.